Well, your call to action is echoed in one of our viewers' questions from Jason S. from Utah. He says, I'm learning on how the IRS is seizing accounts from people that are doing structured deposits and withdrawals less than $10,000. No crime committed, but they're taking their money. This has gone too far. How do we fight this? How do we organize a federal income tax strike?
Well, that's the interesting thing, and I'm glad you bring up the point of organization. First of all, you need to get out of the banking system. You shouldn't have that much money in a bank right now anyway, no matter what. But in terms of organization, one of the things that is morally incumbent upon a group of people to do when it comes to the point that a certain governmental system needs to be replaced, and yes, if you're hearing echoes of the Declaration of Independence in this, you're absolutely right. Because what the Declaration of Independence did is it said, all right, look, we're cutting away from this government, meaning the UK or Great Britain, and we are forming a new government. What you cannot do is you cannot engage in some sort of a counter-revolution, even against an illicit state, unless you have first organized and have a new political structure within which you can work. The reason for this is because if we're talking about trying to wage war against a tyrannical illicit state with just a diffuse anarchy of people, this is not going to work. This is not going to work, and this is one of the main ways that the situation could actually become worse after the fact than it was before. So the word organization, even though that's been co-opted by these communists, and Obama is a community organizer, and one of their mentors, Saul Alinsky, is a quote-unquote, is the father of community organizing. I'm not going to allow them to completely destroy the English language. You do need to organize, and there does have to be some sort of a replacement political framework in place with organization under that before you take any steps. And that is exactly what the founding fathers of the United States did, and that's the purpose of the Declaration of Independence, so that it wasn't just this completely ad hoc, everybody crazy doing their own thing. It's like, look, we have done what we need to do morally. We are forming this replacement structure, and now we're going to war against what we believe is a tyranny over us. And here's why, You've got to have your ducks in a row. You've got to have your ducks in a row. And again, this is the thing that is so frightening to me. Ideally, the best way to do this would be a junta, but there's nobody in the United States military who is morally capable of executing a junta right now. That the U.S. military has been so infected and so co-opted by these horrible, malignant, largely driven by communist infiltration, driven by those forces. And the moral character of flag officers in the United States military is just, it's scraping on the bottom of the barrel. I don't see it much better in the field officer corps. So that would ideally be the best and easiest way to do it, but there's nobody there to do it. All right, now where do you go to next? Well, you should go to leaders of private industry and business. Well, that's just an absolute mess now, too. Where's anybody in the private sector? Where are the leaders of business and industry who are willing to publicly stand up against this regime? Who's speaking out against all these crimes in the financial markets? There's nobody there, because they, too, those paradigms are saturated with psychopaths, and because of the fascistic nature of all this, because the government and the financial industry, and now the automotive industry, the military complex, the Silicon Valley, and all of the computer technological, all of that is so incestuously intertwined with the government and populated by people who have come out of the government and they in turn send people as agents in, it's also intertwined. Where are you going to find enough people of character to get together and lead this movement? That's, again, I don't mean to be Debbie Downer. I don't mean to be so horrifically negative, but there are no leaders of men in this culture. And again, this is one of the objectives of the communists in their infiltration, is to just beat down and destroy the intrinsic morality and also the masculinity of the culture, and get it so that we find ourselves where we are now, in a massively corrupt, morally degraded, highly feminized culture, where there are now at this point no leaders of men. And again, I wish I could be more positive, but I can't. I'm sorry.
Well, I appreciate your frankness. We have another viewer's question that's related to how this plays out, and it's by Master Mariner. He says, the hard reset is inevitable and a no-brainer that our cash savings will be wiped out, confiscated, or rendered worthless. But what about our debt? I find it hard to believe that bankers will allow our debts to be wiped out. Rather, I expect that debts will be transferred into some form of international currency. Just following on to this, we've had some guests on this and then also on other channels that we follow who have made the implication that if the dollar is going to be destroyed through the recklessness of our loose fiscal policy, inflation, and so on, that the biggest debtor wins, and that the government is leading the way, so that individuals should go ahead and take on huge debts and buy silver and that sort of thing. And that implication, although it follows logic on the surface of saying if the dollar goes away, debts go away, it's hard to believe, that the small guy wins in any big collapse scenario.
Exactly. Remember, there is no equal protection under the law, and I think your listener is absolutely correct in his question. There will not be equal protection. Debts relating to the oligarch class will, of course, be forgiven. Of course, that's the point. That is in fact what this looting of the treasury is. Okay? But that is why I started off early in the interview talking about paying off as much as you possibly can your collateralized debt, meaning that which has a physical asset behind it, securitizing it, like your mortgage, cars, if you have farm ground, anything like that. Pay that stuff off so that at least you will have that barrier of protection between yourself and this fascistic monster, financial government monster, when it comes after you. Of course they're not going to forgive your debts, and I think that your listener is absolutely correct when he speculates that if there is the establishment of some sort of a new currency paradigm, trust, they will roll all of your debt over into that new currency paradigm, whatever it is. Don't think for a second that they're going to let you just get away scot-free in all this. They'll let their buddies off scot-free. And in fact, that process is already happening. What do you think, for example, Solyndra? Do you remember Solyndra from a few years ago? That fake solar panel company that got what? A $500 million federal government quote unquote loan? They burned through that in a year. And it was all looting and grift. It was all distributed to the oligarchs who were participating in this. And then, boom, bankruptcy, boom, that's it. So what that is taking a $500 million, $500 million in quote-unquote government debt, letting the people come in and loot it, and then just saying, boom, it's gone. Forgiveness, there it is. Do you think for a second that they're going to let you do that? Of course they won't, because there is no equal protection under the law. And that actually brings up another interesting point where, when I was still had the brokerage and was heavily engaged in the cattle business, I'd have guys call and ask me all the time in this zero interest rate environment, which translated to historically very, very low costs of money for agricultural loans. And these guys would call me and they would say, look, Ann, I can lock in a note at, something really low, like 4%. Why shouldn't I do that? I will have a 20-year note at 4%. And I kept reminding them that if the system collapses, they're not going to honor the fact that you have a 20-year note. These people are criminals. They're psychopaths. The rule of law, oaths, notes, contracts, none of that means anything to them. Nothing. So when you sign a 20-year note at 4% and think that you are absolutely guaranteed that interest rate will never go up, you're out of your mind. If they need to, like, for example, what did we just have happen this week in Russia? Look at this parabolic increase in Russian interest rates. I mean, they raised interest rates in Russia in one day, 650 basis points from 10.5% to 17%. Do you think that when that comes to the North American continent and that kind of parabolic, out of control interest rate spike happens, that you're going to be able to stay in your note at 4%. No, what's going to happen is they're going to call you and they're going to say, look, we're calling your note. You have a choice. This is your choice. You can either pay the thing off in full right now, and we mean you send a wire transfer and pay it off and close out the note right now, or you will refi to 15% or whatever it is from 4%. That will be the choice that you're given. They will essentially put a gun to your head, okay? And so don't think for a second that you're protected in any of this, because you're not. That is so naive.
Related to that as well is the question from John McElroy. He says, will the collapse of America be a sudden, overnight Mad Max kind of thing, or will it just continue to be a slow, day-to-day collapse that takes years? Describe in detail how you think it will happen and when, if possible.
Well, it's already been happening, you know. I guess it's relative to the position of the observer, relative to the intellectual and moral position of the observer. I can tell you right now, I've known the thing is dead for, going on 6 years now. I've known that. The horse is laying there dead. For me, this isn't none of these events are sudden collapses. It's just, it's the larvae, it's the fly larvae eating the dead carcass, But there's other people out there who are still in denial about this, who still think everything's fine. And so when they wake up one morning and their bank account has been swept, to them it will seem like a completely sudden thing. And there will be a hue and cry, and people will be saying, what in the world's going on? What in the world happened here? Oh, my gosh. I mean, we have an example of this just a few weeks ago when Obama did the executive amnesty, right? And basically dissolved the Mexican border. And all of these people on these what I will call conservative, relatively, conservative news aggregators and pundit websites are putting out headlines saying, well, what in the hell's going on? This is the end of the constitutional republic. And I'm just like, you're just figuring this out? This light bulb is just now coming on over your head? You needed to have the Mexican border dissolved to figure out that the Constitution of the United States is no longer in force after all of this? After 6 years of Obama, and then X number of years before that, well, let's face it, the writing was on the wall. It was still salvageable, but the writing was on the wall. But, I mean, since the Obama usurpation, how can you not? How can you be surprised by this? And this just breathless, the rule of law is no longer in force. No, you don't say. You don't say. And now it's already forgotten because there's a 36-hour news cycle. And now, we need to be absolutely obsessed with the fact that North Korea has hacked the email account of Sony and said and uncovered emails that say nasty things about Angelina Jolie. Never mind the fact that the Constitution's no longer in force. That was only sexy for 36 hours. Now we have to move on to the next round of stupidity. And, the next time something happens, people will say again, oh my gosh, can you believe this is happening? So in that sense, yes, it will continue to be this grind where there's I guess two types of people. There will be people who are surprised by it, and there will be other people who will just be sitting there saying, Well, what the hell do you people expect? This has been going on for years. So I guess that's the way you'd classify it. I guess it's kind of analogous to when Hitler rolled into Poland, and everybody's just shocked. Neville Chamberlain is just shocked that Hitler rolled into Poland, and Churchill and the rest of them are just sitting here saying we've been telling you this for years. What do you think? What did you think he was going to do?
This follow-up question in the same vein about awakening to realities that we may be living in denial about. Phillips Saunders writes, after complimenting you as a very principled woman, says that, is your Social Security and Medicare also frozen? He said he listened to a similar story where a woman in her late 60s defaulted on student loans, and now all her government benefits have been seized until repayment. Knowing what she experienced, would Anne still commit to the same plan, and has her credit also been suspended, and what will be her plan going forward?
Oh yeah, my credit is completely, totally wrecked. As soon as you have an IRS tax lien, your credit is finished. And I've had multiple foreclosures too as a result of that. But when I saw that and you sent that to me, I just had to chuckle. I'm 38 years old. I've known since literally the beginning of my professional life that I would never, ever, ever see Social Security or Medicare. That was a foregone conclusion. When I was having that withheld from my paychecks back in my 20s, that was just a tax. That had nothing. That was a tax that was feeding a Ponzi. And even when I was fairly young, I mean, anybody with a brain knows that those things are Ponzi's. So yeah, I don't worry about that. I suppose for someone who was in their 60s right now and we're actually engaging those Ponzi's and we're actually getting payouts out of them, that yes, it is possible that you can have your Social Security and Medicare frozen. Of course it is. They're absolutely ruthless. But you know what? Shame on you for being dependent upon a Ponzi scheme too. Why are you in a position right now where you are dependent upon that? Well, I paid into it my whole life. Yeah, you should have been smarter. You should have known it was obviously a Ponzi. You should have known. We've known for years that these systems were massively in debt, that there's no way that they could sustain and there's no way they could pay out. You should have been making other provisions for yourself other than that, and you shouldn't have fallen for it. But in terms of me personally, I just laugh. You're not going to get any of that, people. I mean, the U.S. technically doesn't even exist anymore. What's happening with people right now who are still getting payouts on all of that is that that's just the airplane, the engines are out, it's gliding, and that's just it coasting on the fumes. They're trying to hold it together for as long as they can and keep it going so that they can maximize the looting. And eventually, it's just all going to end, and they will nationalize everything. Everyone will be on quote unquote Medicare. And now, I mean, there are even people making arguments that the government should guarantee a universal minimum income for everybody, which is straight out of the Communist Manifesto. I mean, totally. And I saw that earlier this week, and people don't realize that if you do that, if you cut everybody a national minimum income, what that simply does is it will cause prices to inflate, prices for baseline commodities like food, for example, will just inflate to completely offset the payout of the quote-unquote national guaranteed income. But again, this culture is so uneducated, contraeducated, and unable to think through even the simplest logical progressions that these obvious frauds and these obvious cons can be foisted again and again and again, and also because the people have not even the slightest knowledge of even recent history, and I'm just talking within the last 100 years in terms of communism. No knowledge of any of that whatsoever. And so they can just play exactly the same cons over and over again, and the pigs will just line up at the trough. And that's what we are now. We're just all a bunch of pigs.
That's a lot of the reason why people come to this channel, is to start trying to find ways that they can start taking steps to take more responsibility for their own self-reliance, sustainability of their family, without becoming increasingly dependent and actually reduce their dependence on government bailouts because of the fragility and basically the slavery that subjects them to. Well, Ann Barnhardt, that's all the time we have for viewers' questions today. Before we let you go, is there any final thought that you want to leave our listening audience?
Well, I just want to thank everybody, first and foremost. I mean, I had my PayPal donation button up for the better part of a year, and the unbelievable munificence and generosity of the folks out there, and just the love. So many times, every time you get a PayPal donation, there's a little space to put in a personal message, and some of the messages, even in just a few short characters, the amount of love that I felt, not just in the form of money, was just incredible and humbling, and I cannot tell everyone how eternally grateful I am and will always be. I've had masses said every month for all of my benefactors, and there's a list, and the list doesn't actually exist on paper. The list is with our Lord. And so anybody who has ever given me money is included now forever and ever on this list of Ann's benefactors. And even if you decide that you hate me, and you decide that I've made you angry and so on and so forth, you'll always be one of my benefactors, and I will have masses said for you for as long as I live. As long as I live, I will continue to have masses offered for you. I understand what money is. I understand that it's a little piece of your life. It's your time and your labor that you are giving to me just because I get on the internet and yell and scream. I'm not entirely convinced that I deserve anything from anybody. I feel like I'm just doing what's morally incumbent upon me. I don't know that I deserve to be compensated with little pieces of your life for that. But please understand how grateful I am. Really, the only vector I have right now for receiving donations is unfortunately cash to the mailbox mailing address that is on the contact page at my website, barnhardt.biz. And I understand that a lot of people are really uncomfortable with that, and I don't blame you at all. So all I can do is reemphasize my gratitude for all of the donations that came in over the past year. It enabled me to have another year of an extraordinarily high quality of life, even though we're not talking about square footage and cars and all that kind of stuff. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the quality of life, being surrounded with wonderful people, having lots of ability to spend time in prayer, oftentimes before the Blessed Sacrament, our Lord in the Eucharist, and it's just been wonderful. And if it all ends tomorrow, I will have memories that will last me until I die, whether that be whether my life is coming to a conclusion sooner or whether I live another 60 years into my 90s. These days in Riverville that have been enabled by all of this and have come as a result of the actions that I have taken. It's proof to me anyway, that I've at least been on the right track in all of this a little bit, and I can't thank everybody enough.
Well, Ann, the heartfelt sincerity of your message, and even more so the integrity of your taking action and living your life in accordance with your word, is an inspiration to many of our listeners, because it's such a rare commodity in today's world, is to see someone living their life with true integrity. And your call from the heart to awaken the fires of freedom within the hearts of all people, all free people, to rise up and to do what is necessary to stand up for their own lives and for the lives of their children, their children's children to come ahead. Because when you talked about any delay that we kick the can down the road through our own complicity with this system of injustice, it makes the hammer fall harder later. Will not only fall on us, but on our future generations. And I think of our children and grandchildren, and just want to personally extend our thanks as we close out this interview for all of our Reluctant Preppers family who truly appreciate your call for integrity and for awakening. And that's, again, our tagline is being aware and prepared. So thank you for helping all of us to increase our awareness, and so that we can prepare for a better life for ourselves and our children.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for the platform, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.